So these kinds of chords that we're going to be learning about today are called drop two voicings, and they allow you to be able to play things like this. So drop two voicings are actually coming from, funny enough, writing for horns and big band. They're very, very common sorts of voicings. So if you actually learn this on the guitar, you're going to understand really well how chords are structured and written out actually for basically any other sort of setting that you want to write out chords for. When we build seventh chords, those of you who know how seventh chords are built, very simple. They're built sort of like triads. Triads have a 1, 3, and a 5, but then with a seventh chord, we add a seventh on top. So if you look here on the left, you can see the text on the top says something called close POS. So POS is just short for position. So close position. What does close position mean? It basically just means that all of the notes in the seventh chord fall within 1 octave. So they have a range that is within 1 octave. Now, if you're a piano player, close position seventh chords and all the inversions of them are super duper easy to play. But actually, if you try to play them on a guitar, a lot of them are actually completely impossible to play. So that's where this idea of drop two comes in and actually makes all these chords that are super duper easy to play. So drop two, the concept is very simple. The number 2 means the second note from the top, and we drop it down an octave. So if we look here, this chord on the left is structured 1, 3, 5, 7. And what we do is we figure out the second note from the top, which is the 5th, and then we drop it down an octave. So you see now on the right-hand side, this is the resulting drop 2 chord that gets made when we take that closed position 7th chord and then drop that second note from the top down an octave. So now instead of the order from bottom to top being 1, 3, 5, 7, now the order is 5, 1, 3, 7. And actually, we will go over that exact chord voicing, but if you look on the fretboard diagram, the chord voicing that's written there is going to be this one here in the bottom. So when we do this, we also want to start with each of the different inversions of seventh chords. Now, we're not going to do all the inversions of closed position right now. We're going to do the inversions of drop 2 just in a moment here. But here's another inversion of a closed position chord here on the left. And this one has the 5th on the bottom. So if you're familiar with the inversions of triads, it's the same thing. When the 5th is on the bottom, we call that second inversion. So it's actually a second inversion closed position voicing. But now we turn this into a drop 2 voicing by taking the second note from the top, which is the 1, and dropping it down an octave. So now we have this voicing which goes 1, 5, 7, 3. So you see, it's just changing the order of the notes a little bit by dropping that note down an octave. And now if you notice, actually, right there on the chord diagram, we have this chord, and this is a C major 7 chord. So we want to start by just doing this with C major 7. So now you can remember that that's actually a really cool way to play C major 7. And for that matter, that is a major 7 shape that is movable to play any other chord. If I move that up 2 frets, that's D major 7. Or if I move it down 2 frets, that's B flat major 7, or another 2 frets down, A flat major 7, G major 7, etc., etc. That is a major 7 drop 2 voicing. Okay, so you should get the idea by now. Drop 2 voicing is just the 7th chord, and we actually drop the second note from the top down an octave, and then we arrange the notes on the guitar fretboard. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to figure out the other seventh chord qualities that are going to be commonly used. Okay, so right now, this is a major seventh chord, like I said, C major 7. But now if you're not familiar with the different seventh chord qualities, because now there's a whole new set of chord qualities when we're dealing with that extra note, that fourth note in the chord, as opposed to triads. So we have major sevenths, which have a 1, 3, 5, and a 7. It doesn't matter what order they come in, okay? When it comes to the naming the chord quality, doesn't matter what order they come in, what inversion, etc., etc. If there's a 1, 3, 5, and a 7, it's just a major 7, and that's it. And same thing with all the other chord qualities. But now, if we actually go ahead and do this, we lower the 7th. So in this case, the 7th is B. So the root is C, the 3rd is E, the 5th is G, and the 7th is B. So if we lower the 7th, that's going to give us a dominant 7th chord. So now, of course, same thing. You can remember that chord shape. That is going to be a dominant 7th chord shape that we can move around. If you have to play a G7 chord, well, there it is. C7 right there, okay? So we want to see how to figure out all these different shapes. And then also this is going to really help your knowledge of how these chords are constructed as well and seeing the notes. So B turned into B flat. So now that's the flat 7. Now we also have to learn minor 7. So if we take the 3rd, which is E, move that down a half step, bingo, now we have a minor 7 chord shape. So this one, people play it a couple different ways. I personally like to just bar with my middle finger those two notes that are in the same fret, the B flat and the E flat. But some people do this, they play with separate fingers. I don't like that way as much, but some people like it better. So that is our minor 7 shape. So that one is going to be used tons and tons and tons, right? Minor 7 chords are incredibly common. You have E minor 7 or F sharp minor 7 or D minor 7, any different minor 7 chord. Okay, and then finally, the last one we're going to check out. There are some other chord qualities that you can check out, but I don't want to get too complicated. This is the first video I'm doing on these drop 2 voicings. Is actually going to be half diminished 7, also known as minor 7 flat 5. Why is it called minor 7 flat 5? Because it's like we take a minor 7 chord, and now the 5th is G, we lower it a half step, flat 5. Also half diminished because it's a diminished chord. Diminished chords, the main characteristic of them is that they have that flat 5. There's also fully diminished 7th chord, which I didn't write down there, but I guess I'll just show it to you really quick. It actually has a double flat 7. So you actually lower the 7th again. I don't want to get into that because I could do a whole entire lesson just on fully diminished 7th chords. Comment below if you want me to do a lesson on fully diminished 7th chords, by the way. And if I get enough comments, I'll do one. So if you see, let's recap all of those changes. So we started with a C major 7 chord, okay? Then we lowered the 7th. We had a dominant 7th chord, so we got to remember that shape. Then we lowered the 3rd, we made it minor 7. We got to remember that shape. And then finally, we lowered the 5th and we made that a minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished chord. So this is super important because we need to remember that process, because now what's coming up is we're actually going to play through all of the chords in the key of C major, and we're actually also going to play through them all in every inversion. So once we find a new inversion, again, this is still actually a root position drop 2 voicing. Why is it root position? Because the lowest note is the root. Once we get through inversions, you're going to need to go through that process playing through all those 4 chord qualities so you can figure out all the different chord shapes they're going to have to play in order to play all the chords that are in a given key. So with that being said, those of you who don't know, let's just go over really quick how we can tell what inversion is what, okay? So we got this little chart on the bottom here on the left, and you see that on the left column, it just tells you what's the lowest note. So the lowest note is the most important thing to tell what inversion we're in. So in this case, the lowest note is C, which is the root. So whenever the lowest note is the root, we call that root position. And if you notice, actually, in all of these chords, the C is going to be the green note there because that's the root. So I want to kind of highlight that in your head. It's really important to know where the root is, okay? And then if the third is the lowest note, so in this case, some kind of E note, if it's a minor 7th chord or something, it would be E flat, right? But in this case, it's a major 7th chord, so it's E natural. If E's on the bottom, we call that first inversion. If G's on the bottom, we call that second inversion. And then finally, this is the tricky one, is that's different from triads, is that if B is, which is the 7th, if the 7th is on the bottom, now we call that third inversion. So we have 4 different ways. So we have the root on the bottom, the 3rd, the 5th, or the 7th on the bottom. So again, just try to memorize that little chart in your head, okay? So with that being said, let's figure out how to invert this chord, okay? Inverting is going to be really, really important. And then we're going to go over all the chords that are in a different key. So when we invert these chords, it's going to be very, very simple, but yet it might be a little bit tricky for you to execute it, okay? So every single one of the notes in this chord has to move up on the same string to the next available chord tone. So for example, let's take this C note right here. That C note has to move up to an E. Why? Because C is the root and E is the 3rd. It's the next available chord tone. So if we're taking the 3rd and we want to move up, we have to move it up to the 5th. Or if the note is the 5th and we're going to move it up, we have to move it up to the 7th. So we're going to invert this now, and we're going to figure out all the inversions really quickly. So we're going to move C up to E. So we're going to move G is going to move up to B. B moves up to C. And then finally, we're going to move E up to G. So E was the 3rd. We moved it up to the 5th. So now we have this chord here. And what is the lowest note in the chord? It's E. Is E the root, 3rd, 5th, or the 7th? It's the 3rd. So what inversion is this? It's first inversion. So this is what it looks like. Whoops. Played it off a half step. I'm not the smartest person in the entire world. So what actually we're going to do for right now is let's go ahead and move this all down an octave. So if you notice, we're already getting kind of high in the fretboard. So that C is kind of currently on the 13th fret. Let's move it down, and now it's going to be on the 1st fret. Okay, so we can play it all the way down here now. Very, very cool sounding chord. So before we had that C major 7 root position, this is still C major 7. But now all of a sudden, it sounds like quite different, right? And actually, I'll just give you a hint. The interval between this B and the C note here is kind of what gives that crunch. So if I play just the 3rd and 2nd strings, ooh, it kind of sounds bad by itself, but then when you add in the rest of the chord, it sounds very, very beautiful and ominous at the same time. So it's amazing. It's still the same chord, but the inversion just makes it sound completely different, right? So now that we have figured out this inversion, let's figure out the different chord qualities. So we need to lower the 7th, and now we have a C dominant 7. Now we lower the 3rd, and now we have C minor 7. This one definitely bar down those 2 notes on the 1st fret. And then finally, we're going to lower the 5th, and now this gives us half diminished. So now you figured out all of the different notes all the different chord qualities that are in first inversion with a drop 2 voicing. So now let's invert it one more time, actually 2 more times. We need to invert it again because we need to get second inversion, and then we also need to get third inversion. So now we're going to repeat that process that we did before. We're going to move E up to the next available chord tone. What's the next available chord tone? It's G. So we're going to move E up to G. Now B is going to move up to C. C moves up to E. And then G moves up to B. Okay? So now this is a freaking awesome chord. Love this one. This is now a second inversion. Why? Because G is the lowest note. G is the 5th. It's second inversion. So that's our second inversion C major 7. So before we had the root position one, then we had the first inversion, and then now we have the second inversion one, right? So now let's do the same thing. We need to figure out all our different chord qualities. So we're gonna lower the 7th, which is B. So now we got C dominant 7. Now we're gonna lower the 3rd, which is E. We're moving to E flat, so now it's C minor 7. And now we're gonna lower, finally, to get half diminished, we're gonna lower the 5th, and then we end up with C half diminished, right? So if you notice, by the way, once we get to the half diminished voicing, it's literally just every single note moves down a half step except for the root. So kind of interesting. So that's all of those all those chord qualities in second inversion. We're gonna circle right back around and use all of these in a second because we're gonna play different chords. We're gonna play C minor. We're gonna play C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, all the diatonic chords in the key of C, and then we'll be done with this lesson. So one more inversion for us to figure out of C major 7, and then we'll actually have figured out all the inversions, okay? So now G is the 5th, we gotta move that up to B, which is the 7th. C is the root, we gotta move that up to E, which is the 3rd. E is the 3rd, we gotta move that up to G, which is the 5th. And then B is the 7th, we're gonna move that up to C, which is the root. So we're gonna get this chord, which is C major 7, 3rd inversion. Ooh, that one kind of sounds crunchy, and I'm not gonna lie, this one I don't use so much. It's gotta be a very, very sort of specific context to use this 3rd inversion, specifically 3rd inversion major 7. Why does this kind of sound so crunchy? Well, look, if it boils down to actually the bottom note and the top note. So this interval here, if I play just the 4th string and the 1st string, that's what we call a minor 9th interval. So just in a vacuum, B going up to C, which is an octave higher. No, normally C is just a fret higher than B, right? But now it's going all the way to the C, it's an octave higher. It's a very, very unstable sound. But you'll see that some of the other 3rd inversion ones sound really cool. So let's figure out the other chord qualities. So we got to lower the 7th, and now we get C dominant 7. That one sounds a little bit better because now we don't have that minor 9th interval because now it's B flat to C. That's actually a major 9th interval. Now, this one's really neat. We're gonna lower the 3rd, which is E to E flat. And now check this out. It's literally a minor 7th chord. And it's just barring down all the notes on one fret. 4 notes there on one fret. So this is probably the easiest of all of the drop 2s is this chord right here. By the way, also one thing that's kind of easy about the 3rd inversions is that the root is the top note in this particular case. So if you just pay attention to where you're placing the top note of the chord, that's where you can figure out, to place it for G minor 7 or something. Just make sure, oh, there's G on the 1st string, or there's E on the 1st string, or there's A or A minor 7. So last one we got to figure out is going to be the half diminished chord. So we're going to take the G and move it down a half step, G flat, and now that's our half diminished voicing, okay? So that's all of the inversions and all of the chord qualities starting from C. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to go all the way back to root position, and now we're gonna figure out, the last thing we're gonna do is figure out all of the 7th chords that are in the key of C major. And then also, this is gonna be the same thing for every other key. You're just gonna have to plug in the different root notes for the different keys, like G major, all 12 keys. You should practice everything in all 12 keys. So if we analyze and build all the 7th chords in the key of C major, we're gonna end up with these chords here. So the 1 chord is gonna be C major 7. The 2 chord's gonna be D minor 7. The 3 chord is going to be E minor 7. So the 2 and the 3 are both minor 7th chords. Again, we got to go over this because you might know it for triads, but with triads, you just think minor and major. But now we got to think what kind of 7th is it. So it's minor 7 is 2, and also minor 7 is 3. And then 4 is going to be major 7. So normally triads, 4 is just major, so it's major 7. And now here's where things get a little bit tricky is the 5 chord. So normally with triads, the 5 chord is just a major triad, but in this case, it's a dominant 7th chord, which is, if you remember from what we just did, it's actually a major triad with a flat 7 on it, okay? So the 5 is always dominant 7th chords. And then the 6 is gonna be another minor 7. And then finally the 7th, that's where that half diminished chord comes in. And that's the little symbol for half diminished. It's just like a circle with a slash through it. So if you ever see that in a chord chart, that's what that means. It means half diminished, okay? So we're going to run through this. So if we remember, let's just review our shapes for each of these chords, and then we're going to move them, okay? So we had C major 7. So for both the 1 and the 4 chord, this is the shape that we're going to use, okay? So we're going to have this as an F major 7 also. And then we're going to have this shape for once we get to the 5 chord. This is the only dominant 7th chord in the key is the 5 chord. And then for that 2, 3, and 6, so D minor 7, E minor 7, and A minor 7, we're going to be using this shape. And then for B half diminished, it's going to look like that. Okay, so there's another way that we could also figure out all these chords. We're not going to think about it like this right now, but if you actually just take each of these notes in this chord and move it up to the next note in the key, you'll actually automatically figure out all these shapes. But anyway, let's move these up now. So we're actually going to do that. So now we're going to make this a D minor 7. Look, that's the same exact chord. Same exact chord shape as when we figured out the C minor 7. So we C major 7, then D minor 7. Now, for just the sake of simplicity, let's go ahead and move this down an octave. So we could move it all up. We can move it up an up 2 frets. Let's just move it down an octave because we don't want to start to run out of space. So there's an E minor 7. That's the 3 chord. And then we're going to move everything up. And you actually see here, I'm moving up everything in the chord. We're just moving each thing up either a whole step or a half step. It's moving up a diatonic step. So I'm just moving up to the next note that's in the key, and it's automatically giving it the C shape. So there's our F major 7, the 4 chord. Same major 7 shape as before. Then we're going to move this up. And now we got G7, the 5 chord. And then we're going to move up to the 6 chord, A minor 7. So it's going to be the same exact shape as before, the minor 7 shape. Oh, what do you know? Look, there's that minor 7 shape. And then finally, one more chord left, the 7th chord, or the 7 chord. I don't know if I just said 7th, but there's B half diminished 7. And then we just go back up to C major 7, and we are back exactly where we started. So if you notice, actually, this is a really great way for you to learn your fretboard too. And actually, this is one of the things that really got my fretboard knowledge super leveled up, is by working through these chords as well. Because now once we start doing the inversions, we're gonna have to keep track of the notes on different strings, because the root is not always gonna be on the bottom string. So there we go. So if I just run through all of them again, if you wanna review these, just rewind and go look at it. So C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished, C major 7. So now we actually have to do this for all the different inversions. So if we remember, now we had first inversion. So let's just review the chord shapes. So there's dominant 7 with the flat 7. There's minor 7 with the lowered 3rd. And then there's half diminished with the lowered 5th. I should be able to move faster now because you guys should be starting to get it now. I shouldn't have to, the 3rd and the 7th. No, you should remember by now because we already went through this video. So now we're going to move every single note up and we're going to play D minor 7. So you're going to see all the different exact same shapes that we played before. There's D minor 7. So it's the same shape, but now all of a sudden that note there in the second string is on a D. Okay, so there's E minor 7. So we'll play that. Same exact shape that we played for D minor 7, of course. And now we got to play F major 7. And what do you know? It's going to be the exact same shape that we played for the C major 7 before, but now the root note is on an F. And then we're going to move everything up a diatonic step, and we're going to get G7. Same exact dominant 7 shape from before. Now let's move it up, and we're going to have A minor 7. There we go. There's A minor 7. And then finally, we're going to have B half diminished. So all those first inversion diatonic chords, C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished, C major 7. Okay? So we're going to go all the way back now to, if you remember, our second inversion drop 2 voicings. So let's just review. So we had that's major 7, then that's dominant 7, then minor 7, and then finally we had our half diminished. Okay, so there's D minor 7. And now we're going to play that exact same shape. The fun thing is that every single time we have the 2 chord, we just move the exact same shape up a whole step for the 3 chord. So there's the 3 chord, E minor 7. And then we're going to have the 4 chord. Then we're going to have the 5 chord, which is G7. And then we're going to have the 6 chord, which is A minor 7. We're going to actually move that one down. So we're going to move it here. We don't want to have that all super duper high. Maybe you're playing this on acoustic guitar. If you're playing it on acoustic guitar, it might be hard. By the way, just a fun fact, that A minor 7 is found in the song Stairway to Heaven. It's actually an A minor 7 drop 2 voicing. Just thought you might want to know that. And then we're going to move this up and we're going to have B half diminished. You notice that all the shapes are correlating with what we had before. And then back to C major 7, the original second inversion we had. So let's just run through all those. C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished, C major 7. And then finally, we're just going to do one more, and then this lesson is done. I know it's a lot, but it's super duper important and super duper useful for you guys to know this stuff. It's going to make you way better, and you're going to know like a bazillion different chords. You literally just learned 4 different versions of each of these different chord qualities. So you actually just learned 16 different chords in this lesson. 16 different chords. That's kind of ridiculous. Okay, so there's our third inversion, major 7. Then we have the dominant 7, then minor 7, and then half diminished 7. Okay, so let's run through all of them. So there's our 1 chord, C major 7. Then we have our 2 chord, which is D minor 7. Super duper easy one, right? We're just making sure it's a D in the top. And then we're going to move it up 2 frets, and we're going to get E minor 7. And then we're going to move each of these notes up. We're going to get that major 7 shape we had before, and we're going to have F major 7. You could also play this one down an octave there. Kind of sounds really nice and crunchy when you move it down an octave. But now let's go down an octave for the G7. So G7 is going to be that same dominant 7 shape from before. Boom, there's G7, the 5 chord. And then we're going to move everything up. We're going to get A minor 7. Same thing there, that super easy chord shape. There's A minor 7, and then finally B half diminished. And then finally back to C major 7. So all of those third inversions, C major 7, D minor 7, E minor 7, F major 7, G7, A minor 7, B half diminished 7, C major 7. My advice to you is go back and practice and review every section of this video, particularly that last part where we ran through all the diatonic chords. I know that I'm going fast because if not, I mean, this video could easily take 2 hours. I've spent multiple lessons with people, like teaching them this stuff. So I know that this video might have actually gone a while, but believe it or not, it's actually really fast compared to most of the time how long it takes people to learn, including myself, by the way. So go back, play through, and memorize every single one of the inversions and all of the diatonic chords in the key of C major. And then once you figure that out, by the way, if you're practicing this, you should know the names of all the notes in every key. But once you've figured that out, then practice them in all 12 keys. So if you all want to learn how to master the guitar fretboard, make sure you head on over to Jamsville.com and check out the Jamsville GPS Fretboard Fundamentals course. All right, everybody, until next time, listen, learn, and jam.